Welcome, everyone, to L7C Podcast. We are going to be talking about those Ohio State Buckeyes who played Michigan State yesterday. And when we're talking about the Buckeyes, we got to have the Captain Byron Mitchell on. How you doing today, sir?
Doing good. Another Buckeyes win.
Hey, that is the truth. As Byron just stated, the Buckeyes did win this game 52-12. Even before we even talk about the game, as of yesterday, which was December 5th, this was our first game since Indiana, which was November 21st, because we had to cancel a game because of COVID. Ryan Day got COVID, and then later it was released yesterday. 28 players had COVID?
I think it was 22 players, including Ryan Day, had COVID.
Yeah, so around 22 players had COVID, and everyone in the state of Ohio was is Justin Fields one of those people? Because if he's one of them, then he would have been out for 21 days, and that would have been problematic. But he got on the bus, he played, and we got the victory. Byron, if you want to talk about the game, what you liked, what you didn't like, tell us about the game.
So we had, I think, 4 starters out for our offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a backup center.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Tuff Borland out on defense. So our offensive line, it was a new offensive line. I think Wyatt Davis was the only starter that didn't get COVID on the offensive line. So our center, I think his name is Henry Miller, our backup center. He was kind of struggling a little bit yesterday. And I think with the interceptions that Justin Fields threw against Indiana, I felt like we started off a little slow. It was more so run heavy than it was, Justin Fields throwing. So I was kind of worried that we wouldn't, be as balanced on offense as we have been in previous games, but we ended up pulling it out. Justin Fields, again, just had a great game. Like you said, we pretty much beat the brakes off of Michigan State, but I think we started a little slower than I was used to, but we got it together.
Yeah, and Justin Fields, he went about 17 for 24, 199 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. Then on the ground, he carried it 13 times for 104 yards with 2 touchdowns as well. I know at the beginning of the year, we talked about we didn't want to see him close to leading our team in rushing, but it looked like Trey Sermon, he had a big day, 10 carries, under 12 yards, had a touchdown. Master Teague didn't really have his best game. He had 14 carries, 46 yards, no touchdowns. Then catching Chris Olave, 10 receptions, 139, 1 touchdown. Garrett Wilson, 3 receptions, 59 yards, 1 touchdown. So even with the makeshift offensive line, our offense was humming going into this game. And with Michigan State, I know, as you know as well as I, that's always a game that no matter how bad or what they're looking like, we're always cautious when we play Michigan State. Because they have beaten us more times in the decade than Michigan, and Michigan State has cost us twice in this decade from going to a national championship game.
I know. I remember 2015 vividly of them costing us a chance at the playoffs.
And in 2013, they beat us in the Big Ten championship.
Yep.
When we were undefeated. So they've cost us national championships this decade. So even though they were down, but that was during the Mike D'Antoni teams, and even though they were down, they were just coming off their biggest game of the year, beating the number 8th ranked team, Northwestern. But I just think that with the weeks we had off, and everyone was still talking about the Indiana game because it was down to the wire, which, I mean, we've seen Indiana as a top 10 team, but they just felt like we played poorly. And especially Justin Fields, hearing now that if you watch the other games after us, no one has him in any Heisman conversation now.
Nope, that Indiana game cost him, unfortunately.
And I know me and you talked about that, our loss pod, about with the 3 picks, is he out of the race? And you're like, yeah, there's still time, but right now they kicked him to the curb.
Yeah, I think if he had have played against Illinois, I think he maybe still would have had a chance. But since we had to cancel that game, I think it just and that last performance didn't leave a good taste in anyone's mouth. I think with those two, a combination of those two factors, I think they're like, nah.
Yeah, even if you listen to the broadcast, if you heard like Dan Orlowski talking about he needs to be like special today. I was like, have you guys not watched this guy play in the past year and a half that he's been at Ohio State? He had his worst game against a top 10 team, which is true last time we played, but the guy's been near perfect since been Ohio State, and I don't know, I just felt like they were downplaying him a little bit. Like this guy's like he's not going to be the number 2 pick in the draft. And if you would have took away the Indiana game, people were talking about him potentially being number 1 over Trevor.
I think he still has potential to be either 1 or 2. I mean, every quarterback has a bad game. Yeah. So I don't think it's right for them to just downplay him because he had one bad game against a good Indiana team. And I can see if it was like he had a bad game against Michigan State, then you're like, okay, what's going on? But it's just a bad game against a good team.
Yeah, and Indiana, who proved they are a top 10 team, beating Wisconsin yesterday without Michael Penix. So
right,
that's that with that. And I just also the defense. We got a pick 6, we got a fumble. I think we got 2 interceptions that game. Pretty sure. So
yeah, we got 2 interceptions. One from Peyton Thorne, their backup, and then Rocky Lombardi, their starter.
Yeah, so there wasn't anything I didn't like in this game. I know our biggest weakness right now is our pass defense. And I think Shaun Wade got it. I think Shaun Wade got a turnover too, I believe.
Yeah, Wyatt Davis got a deflected interception to himself, which was amazing. And then I think Shaun Wade had an interception as well.
Yeah, so because our secondary has been back this year, and Shaun Wade, who opted out but then opted back in, and then he is supposed to be that next top corner in OSU's pipeline, and he has been getting cooked this year. So to see him get that pick was really, really special. Byron, was there anything you didn't like about this game?
There wasn't anything I didn't like. Like, I think we played well on all fronts. Besides, having a different offensive line. I know that the center, it was his first game playing center. Even then, I mean, he had some couple ones that were snaps that were bad, but overall, I think everyone played well. And it wasn't Wyatt Davis that had the interception; it was Haskell Garrett.
Okay. And then also, even though it was on an interim basis, Larry Johnson was the head coach because Ryan Day was gone due to COVID. First African-American head coach to coach at Ohio State, the football team.
Now he's 1-0.
And he's 1-0, and you saw them pour the Gatorade on him for the monumental achievement. So that was great to see. Byron, anything else on this game before we talk a little bit more about what's going on in college football as we go closer and closer to playoffs?
I mean, I think there's not much that we can say. Not that it was a guaranteed win, but you felt that Ohio State was just going to come in and just impose their will to get that Indiana game out of their mouths, and I think they did what they needed to do.
Right. And then, so good win for the Bucks. Later on in the pod, we're going to talk about what week it is, even if we're hoping this week happens. So let's just move on and talk about the other things. Let's talk about the college football playoff ranking currently. So currently you have Alabama at number 1, Notre Dame at 2, Clemson at 3, OSU at 4, and then you have 5. You have Texas A&M at 5, Florida at 6. There's a lot of people talking that if we don't get this Michigan game this week, and the Big Ten doesn't change the rules to let us in the Big Ten championship game, there's a lot of people thinking Texas A&M, Florida could potentially jump us, and it's been big talk. What are you thinking about these scenarios right now?
As we all know, Alabama and Clemson are probably givens to be in the playoffs. Notre Dame is still a toss-up because I think they have the ACC championship game that they can go to against Clemson.
Yeah, that game, they're already both locked in. That game is set.
Okay, so that game could be a toss-up. I feel like even if Clemson loses, they could still potentially get in because it's Clemson. And then there's us. So we're like the odd man out this year. So I feel like if we don't get the Michigan game and we don't get a chance to go into the Big Ten championship, unless say Florida goes in and beats Alabama, I
that is worst case scenario for us.
That is a worst case scenario. I think Florida would jump us.
They would.
Now I don't know why they have Texas A&M at 5 because do they have a game against Florida still? Or
I think they beat Florida. Let me pull it up. Yeah, their biggest win is against Florida, 41-38, and their only loss was that butt whooping Alabama gave them, which I guess they're crediting the butt whooping as, their only losses against Alabama, which was a destruction game.
Okay. So if they went out, it would probably be Alabama versus Texas A&M then in the SEC championship.
No, as of Alabama's win against LSU, that's already locked too. So A&M's just a placeholder. It's already Alabama versus Florida SEC championship.
Okay.
Because Texas A&M is in the SEC West, and Alabama's already clinched it.
Okay. I thought they were in the same division as Florida. So
Georgia.
Okay, so we already have the ACC championship game locked. We already have the SEC championship game locked. So if we don't get the Big Ten championship, would it be 2 SEC teams and 2 ACC teams?
So right now, looking at it, if we play everything out, I honestly think the only spot that's available is the 4th spot that we are in. Because if you look at Notre Dame, which even though COVID year, being in the ACC might have been the best thing that's ever happened to them, because Notre Dame has the biggest win of the year against Clemson.
Yep.
They have a win against North Carolina. They've got wins. And Clemson's only loss was in that nail-biter overtime game against Notre Dame. And even though they put up a lot of points, the caveat is they didn't have Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
So if this game, Clemson beats them 35-28, and Notre Dame's only loss is their rematch with Clemson, I think Notre Dame did regardless. As long as they don't lose by 30 or 50, they're in. And Clemson would automatically be in. Alabama, if they beat Florida, they're in. So it's tough because then you got, as Urban Meyer's brought this up himself, you got Cincinnati at 7 at 8-0. So if these teams of Texas A&M and Florida start falling, if Cincinnati gets to 10-0 and we're only 5-0 with no conference championship, what do we do there? I think we're better than Cincinnati, but Cincinnati being 10-0 and us being 5 with their conference championship, potentially something like that, that's rough.
Right. Yeah. This is a very, very strange year with all due to COVID. But it's just a strange year. I hope that we get to the Big Ten championship so we can get a shot at going to the playoffs. But there's just so many factors. Like, are we going to play our last game of the season? Is anyone else going to win out? Like, there's so many factors that 4th spot is usually a toss-up, but this year is way more of a toss-up than I feel like than any other year.
I think if everything remains course, because I think we're seeing Clemson beat Notre Dame, so I think they'll flip spots. But then again, I don't know if they might. I think the committee is wanting Ohio State to play in the Big Ten championship and win. Reason being is, like, let's say if Clemson beats Notre Dame, Clemson will go to 2, and like theoretically Notre Dame will go to 3. I don't think they would want that because that's the 3rd game that they're playing against each other and then that's right after they just played each other. So it's like, you want to get those different matchups for different fan bases to watch programming. So I personally think if Clemson beats Notre Dame, Clemson will go to 2, and if Ohio State wins the Big Ten championship game, we'll go to 3. And the reason for that as well, Ohio State has a conference championship and Notre Dame does it, but Notre Dame's at 4 because you can't drop them out after losing their only game in the conference championship game. So that way you got Alabama versus Notre Dame, a whole bunch of college football tradition there. And then you got the rematch that's all we've been playing for. Clemson and Ohio State at the 2-3 matchup. What do you think about that scenario?
I could see that. I could see them doing that just for that, again, so they're not having Notre Dame and Clemson play each other for a third time just after that ACC championship, and for that revenge game for Ohio State versus Clemson, because that game came down to the wire too, and we all know what happened. So I think they would, do that matchup just for the ratings alone.
Yeah, and I mean, you could play that. So much storytelling you can play up with that game. Like, it'd be ridiculous. Now, and people listening, if you are a Buckeye fan, you might despise them or whatnot, but you have to sit down and watch that entire SEC championship game.
Yes.
That game's deciding if we're getting in or not. Even if we win the Big Ten title, guys, if we go 6-0, win the Big Ten title, and Alabama somehow loses on some fluke field goal something in the SEC championship game, guys, they're taking the 11-1 Alabama over 6-0 Ohio State, guys.
Unfortunately, but yes.
So we need Bama to win. Like, you can't miss that game, because that game is going to really decide if we get in or not. And this is if we have a Big Ten championship, if we get there. Now, if we don't even get to play in the championship game, then it really hinges on that SEC championship game. We need Alabama to just destroy Florida, so there's not even a doubt in people's mind that they should jump over us.
I hate having to rely on Alabama to win, but man.
It's just the way it is. I mean, where you're hating on Alabama, relying on them to win, but it's beat Michigan week.
It's beat Michigan.
We need to rely on Michigan to have the game.
That's true. That is the number one priority this week. Is Michigan needs to play this weekend.
Yes. We need the Michigan, the athletic director. We need to play just so we get the 6-0 thing. I know Barry Alvarez talked about they might have to change it if Ohio State's there, and that's cool. But until it actually happens, we need this game.
Yeah, I have never rooted for Michigan more than I am this week, just so we can have that game. But come on, Michigan. You want the Big Ten in the playoffs.
I know, especially Michigan fans out there, wouldn't you want to be the ones to ruin it for Ohio State? That's what you play for in the rivalry.
Right.
To root for the other person. So figure it out with the COVID. I mean, we went to East Lansing with 20-something players not on our team, and we won by 40. And that's the same Michigan State team that beat Michigan earlier in the year. And I don't know if you've seen Vegas, but Ohio State opened up if we play as a 30-point favorite over Michigan, which if you said that 10 years ago, you would look like a crazy idiot.
Right.
A 30-point favorite over Michigan right now at Vegas. And I know when we talk college football, we talk about the Buckeyes college football playoff. But we always have a section about Michigan because they're our rival. I mean, historically, it's the game. When both teams are good, it's the biggest rivalry, I think, in sports, one of them.
Yep.
I don't see them beating us this year. And then that's another year where Jim Harbaugh doesn't beat Ohio State.
That'll make them 0-5 or 0-6.
I want to think 6. Think 6.
Man.
And if you remember at the beginning of the year, that whatever thing at the conference, Ryan Day said he was going to hang 70 or 100 on Michigan.
That would be crazy if we hung 100 on Michigan. But Ryan Day said he wanted to, so I'm like, hey, whatever the coach wants, let's get it for him.
Do you have any, if the game happens, which we have to say now because of COVID, do you have any fear that Buckeyes would come in too overconfident and Michigan would be playing with their hearts out to ruin our season?
I don't have a fear, but it's always possible because any given Sunday, like anything can happen. Like again, Indiana took us down to the wire, and Michigan always plays their best game against us. Sometimes the score doesn't reflect that, but they do play their hearts out when they play against Ohio State. So I wouldn't say it's a major fear, but it's always it can happen.
Yeah, because they didn't even play. They didn't play last week, so it's kind of scary. And to the Big Ten, Barry Alvarez, who's probably the most powerful athletic director in the Big Ten, what he said about changing it, but you got to get the others on board,
right?
To be honest, you got to get the others on board, and you got to get the commission on board. And every podcast we've had, we brought up how Kevin Warren has been GOAT.
Kevin Warren, what a guy!
But you don't hear from him at all. You almost think Barry Alvarez is the Big Ten commissioner, but he's just an athletic director. So, and it's tough because we have 2 big conference championship games left. And I think it was crazy, too, seeing Clemson have senior night, having already played. These teams have played 10 games, and we've only played 5. And we would have been right with them if we stuck to our original plan.
I think we should have stuck to our original plan. That way you can have bye weeks in case, someone gets COVID the week before. We can schedule a bye week, maybe switch teams around to make sure everyone plays equal amount of games. I know on Twitter yesterday, there was a tweet talking about the Barry Alvarez, and I have a friend who is a Wisconsin fan. So he was kind of upset because he was felt like they wouldn't do the same thing for Wisconsin, which I kind of understand. But I feel like if roles were reversed and maybe they were like the number 4 team with a chance to go to the playoffs, I think they may have switched the rules around for them. But they didn't play all their games. I know their fans are upset because they don't get a chance to go to the Big Ten championship because they lost to Northwestern. But still, I feel like if they beat the Northwestern, maybe they would have been able to go to the Big Ten championship if they do change the rules around. So I know there's a lot of upset fans saying, "Oh, Ohio State always gets the rules changed for them," and I get it, but I think as a conference as a whole, you want someone to represent you in the playoffs.
Agreed. And that's why I think James Laurinaitis brought this up over the weekend, that he doesn't understand why people that when a Big Ten team is in the playoffs or whatever, that's not Ohio State, Ohio State fans don't care. But if you see the opposite in the SEC, when an SEC team gets in the playoffs, that's not them. They are beating the drum. They're like, let's go. And then if their team wins the title game, that's what we tried to tell you. SEC, that's why we're the champs, blah, blah, blah. I think some fans need to realize that it's good when your conference represents on the national stage, even if it's not you.
Yes.
It shows your conference.
Like that year Michigan State went, even though I was just sad that Ohio State didn't get to go, I was still rooting for them because Big Ten loyalty.
Exactly. With that too, it's just and then when they got smoked, it's well, the Ohio State, obviously, they would have been smoked too. It's just that perception.
Yeah.
So,
and I hate saying this, but Ohio State is the best team in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, hands down.
And I know there's an Ohio State bias, as everyone says, but I don't see it, but I could be just a blind Ohio State fan. But like I said, you would think you would want, representation in the playoffs. So I get the anger that, people are changing rules for Ohio State, but I also don't get it at the same time.
I mean, this past 20 years, especially these last 10, we have been Michigan State has gotten us. They've won conference championships. Yep. They got one. But besides those ones, we've been so far ahead of the rest of the Big Ten talent-wise and coaching. It's crazy. The gap between us and everyone else in the Big Ten is just wild. And second place, it was Penn State, but they've only won one game this year.
Yeah, they beat Michigan, right?
Yeah, that was the only. So it's crazy with the talent gap, but I do believe if Northwestern, which that was almost going to be a problem if they were undefeated and won the thing, but they got taken care of. If someone else in the Big Ten was in the same situation who was ranked nationally in the top 4 and they just need that win to go to the playoffs, I think they would be talking about the same thing as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
like I said, Wisconsin, if they had won all their games and the only games they were missing was due to COVID, I feel like they would have changed the rules too to get that Big Ten representation. Like Wisconsin's a pretty good team. Like I'm not gonna say they're the worst. Like they're a pretty good Big Ten team. I would lump them with Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin. I would say are probably the top 3 Big Ten teams outside of this year, because this year sucked for Penn State.
Yeah, and with Indiana winning, Wisconsin actually got kicked out of the Big Ten title game. It's Northwestern, basically. They clinched their spot. So if we go to the Big Ten title game, we will be playing Northwestern again.
Yep. It would be 2 out of 3 years that we played Northwestern. It's either Northwestern or Wisconsin that we're playing in the Big Ten championship.
Well, Wisconsin's out. It's automatically Northwestern now. They've clinched.
Yeah, I'm saying the last couple years.
Oh, yeah, the last couple. Yeah, you're right. I thought Minnesota was going to get it last year, but then they
lost to Wisconsin.
So, I mean, Byron, it's beat Michigan week. So how into do you? It's hard. I don't think it's hard to get into beat Michigan week just because we've been so dominant over them. And some people have said the rivalry's dead, this. But we are in such a golden era of Ohio State football. And people say they don't see it stopping anytime soon. But just remember, in the 90s, Michigan was in a golden era of Michigan football. And they were saying they don't see it stopping anytime. So I really think Ohio State fans really need to go super crazy during beat Michigan week and just enjoy destroying them, because there will be a time 10, 20 years from now where it might be reversed.
I mean, that day is going to come. It always happens. Like, you do so well, and then just one year they get you. Like, 2011 is the last time they beat us.
Yep, with Brady.
So it could, like I said, it could happen. I mean, I always enjoy beat Michigan week. I always like talking crap to my Michigan friends. But any year, it's not guaranteed who's going to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agreed. And Michigan, it just looks like Harbaugh wasn't the one recruiting-wise or things like that. But it only takes one coach.
Yep.
One coach here, and then Ryan Day going the NFL there.
Right.
Even though we got good, like Larry Johnson, all of them, but it only takes something like that to really start flipping this thing around. So we got to enjoy these wins, because, I mean, us growing up in the 90s, for anyone who was born in the early 90s or late 80s or even earlier than that, you saw the 90s, we were not getting wins against Michigan at all.
No, we were not.
That was the reason Cooper got fucked, because we couldn't beat Michigan. Now you have kids who are young 20s, 18 or below, who are in Ohio State fans' homes, and they don't know what it's like to lose to Michigan. And like us older people do remember what it's like to see your national championship aspirations die because of Michigan.
Ugh.
So we got to enjoy it. We do. Byron, what do you think the final? Two questions. One, do you think we're going to play? And B, if we do play, what do you got for a final score?
It's hard to say if we'll play, because it's Michigan, and me and a group of friends have been talking about, like, what if Michigan uses this opportunity to screw Ohio State out of the championship? There's the only way Michigan will beat Ohio State is if they cancel the game and they don't change the rules. But I think for a pride's sake, I think Michigan will play. And I think the final score will be, 42-14.
Okay. Yeah, as of right, it's hard because with COVID, you don't know if you're playing literally until the kicker kicks that ball
right
off. So we're definitely going to have to pay attention throughout the week. If we do play, I honestly could see the Buckeyes winning the game like 55-17. I mean, it is Michigan, so you know what that means. You're going to see all the video packages before the game. It's going to be hyped up. You might see some fights because some of the Michigan players are like, well, this is our last game of the season. We might as well go out and try and end Ohio State's season with us. So they're going to put everything they have into that game. Harbaugh's going to put everything he has, but I do think that we are going to come out on top. I said 55-17. And that will get us to the 6-0 and get us to the Big Ten championship game where we will play Northwestern. So, none of that and that. Byron, anything else you want to talk about Buckeye-wise before we sign off today?
I don't have anything else. I think we covered pretty much everything. You know, the playoffs, their win against Michigan State, beat Michigan week. I think we covered everything.
Yeah, I do too. Well, with that being said, thank you, everyone, for listening to the L7C podcast when we talk about the Buckeye Review Sundays. Byron, thanks for always coming on.
Always.
Talk about the Buckeyes. I know we don't come on when we do not have games because there's really nothing to review, but since it is Beat Michigan week, and if we do not play Michigan, you are going to be hearing me and Byron come on maybe that Saturday and Sunday. Nervous wrecks, as we'll be at 5-0, and if the Big Ten hasn't made a decision, you're going to be hearing me and him crunch all those scenarios right down again because we would potentially be in some trouble.
Yeah, we'll have to have if we don't go, we'll have to have a college football playoff preview, even though we won't be in there. But hey, it's for the fans.
Well, hopefully it changes that we are in there because Lord knows that if we don't get in the college football playoff and we just wasted our last year with Justin Fields, it's...
the media's going to have a field day if we don't make it.
And it's going to be bad. But with that being said, thank you, everyone, for listening to the L7C podcast. It is Beat Michigan week, so you know what that means. Beat Michigan. Wear that scarlet and gray all week. Wear those jerseys when it's game day. And let's go
Bucks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.